If you've been on the internet for any amount of time in the recent years, you're probably familiar with skinwalkers, or rather the popular culture version of skinwalkers, which, from what I can see, is basically anything or anyone who acts outside their norm. TikTok is flooded with videos of dogs, cats, and people all acting strange and being labeled as skinwalkers. Or there's that tall, thin, misshapen creature with the deer skull aesthetic that so many seem to favor. And like many things that enter the popular zeitgeist, there are some concepts that have been carried over from the original stories of skinwalkers as told by the Navajo or the Dene people. Hello, and I am Foxheart, and welcome to my channel. And joining me for my admittedly late Halloween video, but all the same, I hope everyone had a blessed Samhain and a happy, safe Halloween. Well, I want to take a quick look at one of the internet's favorite monsters, the Skinwalker. And for clarification, my cozy Skinwalker is indeed taking on that popular aesthetic that I mentioned earlier. But that's because I feel that the culturally appropriate Skinwalker from the Navajo stories isn't really a subject for coziness. And I'll get into that a little tiny bit more later on. And now you might be saying, but Foxheart, aren't you just perpetuating that miscorrect cultural aesthetic? And perhaps, but I also don't want to condemn anyone for enjoying the popular culture version of skinwalkers. I think it's important for people to enjoy what they enjoy without judgment. And just because something is cozy doesn't mean they aren't evil. So let's light our candles, burn our sage, and talk about this rather fascinating obsession with skinwalkers. First, I can't begin to speculate why the internet loves skinwalkers so much. Perhaps it's the idea of something pretending to be someone else or something it's not, and the fact that we all tend to wear masks that at times we act outside the persona we've presented. Or maybe it's just the fascination with creatures of pure evil and attempting to make them understandable and relatable. Now, there are some things which both versions of skinwalkers do possess, mostly the ability to shapeshift and to mimic others, including loved ones and distressed children, in order to trick people. And I think one of the reasons there's so much confusion and misrepresentation in regards to Skinwalker is because the Native American stories themselves do have variations depending on who's telling them, which is only natural. And they also tend to get mixed up with other creatures such as Wendigo, which are not the same thing. From what I have gathered, skinwalkers were healers and shamans at one point who were given considerable power to help protect their people, only to use that power for personal gain. Now, this is sort of their origin point, and there is a way to become a skinwalker, though I'm not going to go into that here as it's rather disturbing and I want to maintain the coziness of my channel. But I will leave some links in the description below that do go into that a little further and talk about how people become skinwalkers. Viewer discretion is advised for that, of course. And while I can't fault people for being curious and interested in these creatures, I know I certainly am, I can't help but feel a little frustrated at how misrepresented they are. How people claim their dog acting a bit weird means they're a skinwalker. And I'm no Navajo, and so I don't really feel the right to be upset about this, but it still irritates me a little to have such a seriously evil creature treated so lightly. Kind of in the same vein as when people worship serial killers as celebrities. It just doesn't quite sit right with me. Now, despite my dislike for how sometimes popular culture takes something spiritual and important to one culture and turns it into a fad, I recognize that maybe people might be introduced to a concept in this way, and instead of being influenced by whatever TikTok trend they come across, they actually want to learn more about it and therefore become more keepers of origin. And this goes for just about anything, whether it's skinwalkers, misquoted sayings, or Christmas trees. So the internet is going to adopt things, and things will get distorted. And this has happened long before the internet was a thing. I should say, people are going to adopt concepts and ideas. And in the retelling, things may become less of what they were. This happens to fairy tales and even history itself. Point of fact, I had a conversation with one of my son's friends about Halloween not being the devil's birthday. And I actually hadn't heard this take in many, many years. It was a little surprising. But I think ultimately it's what inspired me to make this video. Not that I'm an authority on skinwalkers or Samhain or anything, but I do feel a certain passion about expressing my own thoughts and frustrations on how culture sometimes treats sacred things. And so, if you're interested in learning more about skinwalkers, I highly recommend these videos: The Unmasking of Skinwalker and the Terrifying Truth Behind the Internet's Favorite Monster, and Stories of Skinwalkers Surviving Ancient Skinwalker Tunnels. Actually, anything on ShanClan Shadow Productions is pretty good and worthy of checking out if you're interested in more Navajo centered content. Again, thank you so much for joining me for my little fox rant. And of course, there is the free art listed in the pinned comments below. And I hope you have a great and happy day.